November is Scorpio, also known as the sign of the serpent. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Snakes. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, episode 73, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Everest Plateau. And don't forget, you guys can get a hold of us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. That is the email address to talk to us. And we have a brand new Twitter account. We are Tweet Noobs, but we have a Twitter account. It is at Snake Bros with no vowels, so SNKBRS. That's the handle, at Snake Bros with no vowels. So you can get on there.
Noobs.
Hashtag Twitter Noobs. So you can get on there and get involved. We're going to be tweeting, or the Watcher will be paying attention to the feed and tweeting during the show, talking about what we're talking about. So you guys can post questions, actually, like while we're doing the show, and the Watcher can then feed them into the podcast feed where we're talking to him, and we can address the questions like right then. So you guys could potentially get your questions totally not answered right at at the time we're recording the podcast. So if he tells you that we're talking about pyramids, and you can ask us like, don't you know that they build pyramids with ramps? And we can be like, we don't know that, and nobody else does either. So yeah, come get on our Twitter feed at Snake Bros with no vowels. And I think that's about it.
So we don't have enough bandwidth to do live streaming.
Not yet. That's right. We're still waiting for like space internet.
That's right. So the best we can do right now is just to be tweeting about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then we have followers or whatever, or you have questions, or it's just a way to interact. Like once a week while we're in here in studio, we can, through the Watcher, be interacting with people. Whether or not it's related to our show, since you guys can't hear it at the time, it doesn't really matter. If there's something cool that we want to address, we can talk about it.
That's totally true. And also, it's a good place. We will post, we'll post links to each new show as they come out in the feed, and then that's a good way for you guys to share the shows with your followers if you're on Twitter and you have people that follow you or pay attention to what you say. So that's like, we're trying to get in. We don't use social media at all, and we're trying to get in on this because it is a good way it's a good way to give people a way to spread the show around to other people. So, anyone who uses Twitter, follow us, and then like help us out by retweeting our tweets about the show, basically. So
the main reason we're using it is for our own personal gain. Just be straight up.
That's right. Like you can say whatever you want in there, but really what we're doing is trying to get better. We're trying to make our podcast better. We don't care what you say. It's all about us. Also, we are joined, as always, by our good friend and longhead, Mr. Brett England, the Watcher, from his space station in outer space. How you doing out there, buddy? You watching the feed? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm working on that space internet too. Until then, we'll just stick to the tweetering. It's Nick Bars and
it's like snack bars. Snake Bros.
Yeah, close enough.
Yeah. All right. As always, we have space weather news. Did an alien light sail visit the solar system? It sounds like a tabloid headline, but in this case, it could be real. Mainstream researchers from the Harvard Center for Astrophysics have made the case that interstellar asteroid Oumuamua could in fact be an alien light sail. Now, this is the big asteroid that was the long, narrow.
I cannot believe that.
Remember, it was the long, narrow one. It was like, and it came from, it was extrasolar, came from somewhere else, not the solar system. Went around the sun once and then went back out, never to return. Do you remember this?
Mm-mm.
And it was like this long, narrow thing. They always depicted it as being this big cigar shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was spinning all weird. Okay, so that's what this is. Oumuamua, I think I'm saying it right. So the original research was posted on October 31st on the moderated preprint server archive.org. The story of Oumuamua begins in October 2017 when it was discovered by Robert Warwick using the Pan-STARRS telescope atop Hawaii's Haleakala. Yeah, it's something like that. The volcano that's exploding right now. No, it's not. Astronomers quickly realized that Oumuamua was something special. The object was hurtling through the solar system on an unbound hyperbolic orbit. It came from the stars. Dramatic changes in the object's brightness suggested that it was tumbling and asymmetric, thin and wide like a cigar or perhaps a pancake. There's a picture of one of the depictions. On its way out of the solar system, something unexpected happened. Oumuamua accelerated as if jets of gas were pushing it forward. Astronomers who initially thought Oumuamua was an asteroid now turned their attention to the comet hypothesis. Comets naturally develop jets after close approaches to the sun, and such jets could explain the behavior of this object. Just one problem. Despite its close solar approach of only 0.25 AU, which is inside the orbit of Mercury, Oumuamua shows no sign of any cometary activity, no comet tail, nor gas emission or absorption lines, points out the Harvard researchers Shmuel Bailey and Abraham Loeb. Moreover, if outgassing was responsible for the acceleration, then the associated torques would have driven a rapid evolution in Oumuamua's spin incompatible with observations. So if it's not an asteroid, and it's not a comet, what could it be? Loeb, who is the chair of the astronomy department at Harvard University and also chairs the advisory board for the Breakthrough Starshot Light Sail project, realized that the acceleration profile was the key. The non-gravitational acceleration of Oumuamua, scaled with distance from the sun, r as r squared, just like a light sail would behave. Modeling Oumuamua as a thin object pushed by solar radiation pressure, Bailey and Loeb found that it would fit the observations if it were a sheet of material 0.3 millimeters to 0.9 millimeter in thickness with a mass surface density of approximately 0.1 grams per square centimeter. Although extremely thin, such an object would survive an interstellar travel over galactic distances of about 5 kiloparsecs, withstanding collisions with gas and dust grains as well as stresses from rotation and tidal forces, they wrote. The researchers are now calling for more observations to look for Oumuamua-like visitors to the solar system. A survey for light sails as techno-signatures in the solar system is warranted, irrespective of whether Oumuamua is one of them, they conclude. Although technical, Bailey and Loeb's paper is well written and unusually readable for non-specialists, so you should check it out. That is a fantastic Space Weather News article. I mean, we were talking about light sails in the past couple of episodes, about how... there are these science fiction stories where they have these enormous light sails and they have the races, and if the guys in front of you try to move your light sail to where you're casting a shadow on his and it makes ripples pass and everything.
Sun surfing.
Yeah, sun surfing, and tears up his sail and you win.
So this thing, when they say a light sail, they're talking about a natural light sail?
No, they're actually suggesting that it may be an alien object.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
They're saying, look, it had this unaccounted for acceleration. Now if they knew about the elastic universe hypothesis, they might think that maybe it was riding a wave, or something. Or electric universe, maybe it's a metallic shard and it's getting caught up in the.
Yeah, it's designed to.
To ride the
plasma arcs.
Yeah. But they're just saying, look, there's this unexplained acceleration, and it has zero evidence of any type of cometary signature. And normally they would explain those accelerations from a comet as developing interior heat and then jets, right, that would just push it. But it doesn't have any cometary signatures at all. So they're suggesting. So
did it? I can't remember what they were saying. Did it accelerate its spin or make it spin erratic or anything, or did it sort of maintain?
Well, yeah. I mean, it already had a crazy spin, a three-axis spin. But no, it accelerated away from the sun.
That's weird, right?
Yeah.
If it was spinning and there was a jet just coming out of it randomly, it'd just make it spin faster.
Yeah, and there's actually a little animation on spaceweather.com that shows that, where they're saying, this is what it would actually look like. And they show these little jets coming out of it and then making it, roll faster. Yeah. But that's not what happened. It, took off away from the sun. And the acceleration was exactly what you would expect if it was light pressure doing it, is what they were saying.
That's cool.
Or at least very close. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of the best space weather news stories we've had in a while, right there. But there is the regular, because that wasn't really space weather, but there is the regular aurora update. Next geomagnetic storm, another large hole in the sun's atmosphere, is turning towards Earth, spewing a stream of solar wind that should reach our planet on November 10th or 11th. A similar stream sparked a G2 class geomagnetic storm, and auroras visible from the USA on November 4th and 5th. So. All right, what do you got?
All right.
See if you can beat my alien light sail story there.
California hit by 39 quakes in 24 hours, as scientists
But
warn.
there's no problem. Everything's okay.
That's right. As scientists warn of movement along the San Andreas Fault. So I was just.
Wow.
I pulled this one up first because maybe it has something to do with, space weather news.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is on Zero Hedge by Tyler Durden. Of course. It's a pretty long article, but basically it's just talking about how the activity has picked up big time in this area in California. And he quotes from this one article that basically blew his mind. And I thought, people have been saying this forever. The big one may be overdue to hit California, but scientists near LA have found a new risk for the area during a major earthquake. They claim that if a major tremor hits the area, it could plunge large parts of California into the sea almost instantly. Wow. The discovery was made after studying the Newport-Inglewood Fault, which has long been believed to be one of Southern California's danger zones. And he says, when I first read that, I was absolutely stunned. But according to Cal State Fullerton professor Matt Kirby, there is a very strong possibility that this could actually happen someday. And then he quotes again, Cal State Fullerton professor Matt Kirby, who worked with the Leaper on the study, said the sinking would occur quickly and likely result in part of California being covered by the sea. It's something that would happen relatively instantaneously, Professor Kirby said. Probably today, if it happened, we would see seawater rushing in.
Wow. Because relatively instantaneously to a uniformitarian could mean like anywhere between 1 week and a million years.
But then there was this other thing, dude. There's this in this article. He's quoting from a bunch of different stories just about all this crazy activity that's going on in that area. It is the beginning of the San Andreas Fault, where experts fear the big one could happen. But a small bubbling pool of mud that stinks of rotten eggs near the Salton Sea is causing concern. Dubbed the slow one, experts studying the phenomenon say it is similar to a moving sinkhole and is speeding up, destroying everything in its path. So there's this just this sinkhole of mud that's starting to move. It's moving at what did it say, 60 feet a day?
Is it expanding or moving?
It's moving.
Wow, that's weird. That is crazy.
The fact that our planet is entering a time of unprecedented seismic activity has been a major theme. I think Archer had sent us a story about the earthquakes that went off for 2 million years or something.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was. Anyway, it has been a major theme in my work for a very long time, and I'm particularly concerned about the West Coast. Just a few weeks ago, there was some unusual shaking farther north along the Cascadia subduction zone, and I anticipate that the shaking of coastal areas will continue to intensify until things finally break loose. Wow. And the truth is that we can see signs of impending change all around us. Down in Southern California, a moving sinkhole is now traveling up to 60 feet a day and is destroying everything in its path.
Wow. 60 feet a day. I did not know sinkholes could walk.
Yeah. There's this thing. And it's full of rotten egg smelling mud. Picture of it.
Yeah. That's video game shit right there.
Yeah.
Sinkholes that travel around on the ground and you have to run away from them and you can't. You die.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
So here's a good one. If extraterrestrial intelligence exists somewhere in our galaxy, a new MIT study proposes that laser technology on Earth could, in principle, be fashioned into something of a planetary porch light. A beacon strong enough to attract attention from as far as 20,000 light years away.
Yeah.
I love this idea.
Right.
Turn on the porch light so that...
Yeah. I don't know about that.
What's the deal?
Well, I mean...
You don't want to...
The woods are full of monsters
out here, yeah.
It's the Wild West out there. It's wild space. And you just turn on a bright light and be like, here we are. And, it's it's the same kind of thing as you don't do that. When you're in the middle of the wilderness at night, you don't make a lot of noise to attract big predators. You just don't. You kind of bury yourself under leaves and sleep.
But hold on. Okay. So
all right.
So the idea is that basically they're talking about building a high-powered 1 to 2 megawatt laser and then focusing it through a massive 30 to 45 meter telescope aimed out into space.
That's cool. But dumb.
And the combination would produce a beam of infrared radiation strong enough to stand out from the sun's energy. So like in the story, they're just talking about how, you know, that they can use this light even to possibly send messages like, you know, so many bits or whatever per second or something. But I just thought it was cool because thinking back to, you know, before we had all of this amazing communications technology, like just the simple light signal, you know. Yeah. Like,
like
first it was smoke signals.
Click, 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 click.
Yeah.
Smoke signals.
First it was smoke signals back in the butt flapper days. But then, you know, the light signals of just like even thinking about beacons on top of walls, like when something, say some army is coming, they light this beacon, and that can be seen from this other place, and they light a beacon and it can be seen. And so there's all this sort of rudimentary communication that can happen just with this simple light source. So I think it's a cool idea because basically if we turn on a light bright enough, because right now when we look into these distant, even close stars and star systems,
the stars are too bright.
They're too bright, and we only see the planets when they move in front of the star.
Right.
So it would be really cool to be looking out there and just see like this light come on, bing, you know, just like, what is that? And so it would, whether or not we would think, oh, this is alien technology, we would pay more attention to it.
Right.
We would start focusing more stuff out there to see what was going on, and that's exactly the idea. Is that like we turn something on, and somebody just, you know, any like an astronomer that is sort of like at a basic level of astronomy with telescopes, you know, just optical telescopes and stuff, could see it. And that would just cause their whole civilization to start focusing more.
Or the Sepha homeworld sees it and they come to kill us all.
They turn on the light again. Dang it.
Again, there was that story that I remember talking about where they, you know, where SETI finally gets a signal back, and the guy gets the signal and like he translates it because it's in a basic code that he understands, a binary code, and he translates it, and it's very short, and all it says is "be quiet or they will hear you."
Oh God.
Because we've been transmitting radio signals for like 100 years, you know, and it's just like this one alien race took the chance to tell us to be quiet. You know, everyone else is silent because they know that if you're not, or they either weren't silent and got wiped out, or they're silent and hiding. And this one alien race was like, shh.
You live in this forest, and there's this whole group of people that you know that live in the forest, and each person has their little bunkers and their little holes in the trees and stuff. And then these new people come in. And they're making
like, hello.
They're making noise. And it's like you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, they're about to get eaten. But you just like run out there and just like, shh. That's freaky.
That's what I'm saying. Be quiet or they will hear you. Don't turn that light on. Unless it can also be turned into a powerful laser beam that can knock them out. That's right.
Now, that's what would happen. We'd turn it on and they'd be like, they're trying to kill us.
Or they think we're having some massive war. All right. New discovery throws light on mystery of pyramids construction. Egyptologists stumble across ramp that helps explain how huge blocks of stone were hauled into place. The mystery of how exactly the pyramids have been built have come a step closer to being unraveled after a team of archaeologists made a chance discovery in an ancient Egyptian quarry. Scientists researching ancient inscriptions happened upon a ramp with stairways and a series of what they believe to be post holes, which suggests that the job of hauling into place the huge blocks of stone used to build the monuments may have been completed more quickly than previously thought. While the theory that ancient Egyptians used ramps to move the stones has already been put forward, the structure found by the Anglo-French team, which dated from about the period that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built, is significantly steeper than was previously supposed possible. They believe the inclusion of the steps in the post holes either on either side of a rampway suggests the builders were able to haul from both directions rather than simply dragging a block behind them. The team believes those below the block would have used the post to create a pulley system, while those above it pulled simultaneously. Now, the problem with the pulley system is that, as we all know, they don't think that they have the wheels.
And also, it doesn't matter how many turns you put on this pulley system to make it a lighter load for you to pull that rope. It's still the rope. Cannot pull, or the post in the post hole cannot hold
that giant
this stone.
That's right.
No matter where you anchor it, unless you anchor it to another giant stone. How did you get that one up there?
They believe the find to be significant because they say it suggests the work could have been done more quickly, albeit still involving the heavy labor of a large number of people. The system we have discovered would allow more people to exert force at one time, so it means you would be able to exert more force and move the blocks more quickly, said Dr. Roland Inmark, a senior lecturer in Egyptology at the University of Liverpool and the co-director of the project that made the discovery. He told The Guardian that he and his colleagues, including his fellow director Dr. Yanis Gordon of the Institut François d'Archéologie Orientale, or IFAO, intended to publish their findings in a peer-reviewed journal in the near future. The find was made in late September, meaning that that has not yet been possible. He said the alabaster quarry itself, as well as the inscriptions that they were there to study, have been known to Egyptologists for a long time, having first been found by Howard Carter, the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. The team's original focus was not on the ramp leading down into the quarry, but on properly documenting the inscriptions found there. But their attention was soon drawn to the former's construction and what it could tell them about how the pyramids were built. They said the inscriptions allowed them to date the ramp to around the time of the pharaoh Khufu or Cheops, who built the Great Pyramid. While there is no proof of the method that was used to construct the monument, Enmark said it was reasonable to suggest it would have been if the technique was in use at Egypt at the time. So many problems here. Number one, they're assuming that they know when the pyramid was built, despite all the problems with the dating. Number two, no one knows who Khufu is or Cheops. He has multiple names because they're not really sure who he is, you know? And number three, I don't actually have a problem with the ramp theory. What I have a problem with is suggesting that the people that were using those ramps were building the pyramid. Like, what I think the most likely thing is all the evidence that they think they've found for all these massive workforces in and around, and I've said this bore in the podcast, that massive workforces in and around the Giza Plateau at the time they think the pyramid was built was a repair crew and a reconstruction, and they were the ones that did the cladding stones, possibly. Maybe they didn't do those either.
Maybe they were just the window washers, you know?
Yeah,
just up there
they were up there cleaning
with massive ramps and scaffolds cleaning it.
Right. And
because it's not going to stay. I mean, it's going to grow lichen and or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
depending on the weather.
Right.
It's going to get.
And if it was very old, it would definitely have been. They might have been replacing blocks and like we've talked about with the Giza Plateau. There's massive evidence of people coming in later and repairing stuff that was incredibly ancient.
Yeah.
So I think it's highly likely that the Khufu Cheops period, with all the workers and the ramps and the quarries, was not, and that was an alabaster quarry. There's no alabaster in the pyramid. So, but the idea of these people coming in and doing all this work is not, they weren't building the monument itself. I think that they were doing repair and possibly cladding or sheathing.
Yeah. And this is the other problem with the study, is that they already know that the pyramid was built with ramps.
Right.
And so anything that they find that points to their conclusion.
Right. So they find a ramp in a quarry that's a quarry for alabaster, which has nothing to do with the pyramids, and they're like, well, this shows their ramp technology. Yeah.
The other issue that I would bring up too on this subject is in modern times, if we're building a high-rise building, and we should probably talk to the stash about this, but
yeah,
when they're picking up these beams, these massive steel beams, going up the high-rise building to put it up on the next floor up, they're not putting a winch or hitching the rope to the structure that they're building to pull that beam up. They have a separate machine that lifts it up there.
That's true, yeah.
So you don't build the structure to be the thing that's picking, even though it's made to hold the beam up above it.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you get the first beam up there?
Right.
You still use the crane to get the first beam up there.
That's right.
And then you might as well continue using the crane to get the next beam.
Yeah, you're using a separate device or structure or object to pick up the stuff. You're not anchoring anything to the structure you're trying to build.
With a ramp, if you build the ramp, you have to use the ramp. You have to use the ramp to pull the object up. So whatever you're building the ramp out of has to be stronger and able to take whatever force. Like if it requires 5,000 guys to pull a block up the ramp needs to be able to both
hold the block
and the guys pushing against the ramp to pull the block up. And it's like, it's more likely that the ramp would come down because it's got the force of gravity on its side, then the block would go up.
That's right.
Right? Unless they built the ramp out of bigger blocks.
Right. In which case you have the
same problem. It's
Yeah.
like, how do you build the ramp out of big blocks?
It's diminishing returns.
That's right. So where did they hook onto to pull the first block into place?
Right.
The ground. That would work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But they would have to both build those blocks to support the static pressure of all the next blocks on top of them and their forces, plus the force of trying to pull the building apart away from the building itself to drag the next stone up there. It's just that's not.
Yep. I got
right.
what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Like imagine, the Empire State Building or some massive thing where they've got these beams that they're cutting the beams out of a solid block of steel that's a quarter mile away.
Yeah.
So they're way up at the top of the Empire State Building, and what are they going to do? Hook up ropes up to the top of the Empire State Building,
Well,
start dragging that beam from a quarter of a mile away?
Well, like let's just make an example that anyone can understand. You're standing there, and I'm like, hey, can you hold this box? So I pick up the box. And it's really hard for me, and I pick it up. And I'm like, I pick the box up and I put it in your arms, okay? And now I've got another box. I'm like, I need you to hold this other box too. And I grab onto you. While you're holding the one box, I grab onto you with that box you're holding, and then reach down to the other box and try to use you to pick up the box that's on the ground. And you're gonna fall over, and the box isn't gonna go in.
That's right. That's what I'm talking about.
Escape is impossible.
And anybody that tried to do that, you'd be like, what are you doing? Just pick the box up and put it on top. Stop trying to use me to pick up the box. Like, I'm standing here so that you can put the box in my arms. Don't try to, pull on me to pick the box up.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna knock me down.
And think about this too. Imagine the pyramid, and you're almost at the top of the pyramid. So
And then you fall.
you have this ramp, right? You've continued to build the ramp as you do continue making courses going up and up and up and up. Now you're almost at the top. So you've got this. The ramp's getting steeper.
Yeah.
Or longer.
Right.
It has to be one or the other,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Or both.
Yeah.
So you've got this steep and long ramp, and you're almost at the very top, and you put however many guys it takes in front of the block to pull it, and behind it pushing it. Once you get really close to the top, where do all the guys go that are pulling it
Yeah.
to do that last bit?
Right.
Do they just hang off the other side? Or
Right.
do they have ramps on two sides?
Yeah, you gotta have
It's
a ramp
just-
on the other side too. And then you end up with ramps that cover more surface area than the pyramid.
The actual pyramid.
Yeah.
Where did all that go?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yep. Yep. So, as an aside, I just want to say this. This is kind of a personal note, but I bought a new desk today. Right?
Okay.
I have this really crappy old corner desk that I have, you guys have heard the story where I live in the tower with the cat, right? And I have the entrance to the tower, the only entrance, and then I have this little crappy corner desk, and I have this massive computer with all these monitors set up on this corner desk, and everything's kind of wobbly and iffy because, my biggest monitor is actually balanced on top of one of my speakers because I don't have any room for it on the desk. So I was tired of that, and I went and bought a new desk. And there's just something about buying a badass desk. I can't wait to take all that whole setup down, just tear everything apart, clean out the entire corner, and set up this badass brand new desk. And I'm gonna feel like it's and then I'll be sitting there in a dark and stormy night, looking up stuff for this podcast, and it's gonna be awesome. I just feel incredibly empowered by this new desk that I got. I just want to say,
yeah, man. That's great.
Cool story, bro. All right, we don't know how long we've been going. What's the time here? What do we got? All right, we got 2 minutes. So we had we talked about procession last week a lot, and did we have a few things that we wanted to add to that? Yeah, some corrections we wanted to make.
I did. I'll have to think about it. I didn't have it.
Didn't have it keyed up in your brain.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we also have some listener emails coming up, but I don't want to read those with only 2 minutes left to go. So
Yeah, I'll think about it in the break.
yeah, let's just go ahead and take the break, and we'll come back and do a little extra on the other side.
Snake break.
Yep. Take a snake break.
Welcome back to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, episode 73, where we espouse slithering snippets of the syllabic fork-tongued sibilance. Something or other. Got to work on my alliteration a bit. So,
Yeah, it was slightly sloppy.
Slightly sloppy. Sorry about that. I listened to episode 72 twice, and that's only happened with one other episode, which was the
62.
Oh, was it 62? Yeah, it was Clint
Clint's
Beckham.
episode. Yeah.
And the main reason was that I'm curious, did we do a good job explaining precession? Because we have tried it before on the podcast. So I'm really curious from you listeners if you were able to actually, did you get it? If you hadn't already understood it, did you understand it after we explained it again? And I would like to know what helped you to understand it, if it did, or if it didn't, just say no. You know what I mean? Nope. But in that, I was just trying to imagine myself just being somebody who'd never heard of it and listening to our explanations of it, like, because it took me a long time to figure out how this thing works. And, through graphic representation and people describing it and all kinds of things like that. And then really just like looking at the sky and trying to work my brain around how this thing is actually working. So I'm very curious if that helped anybody at all, or if not. And one of the other things I thought was that it is, to me, a complex idea, and I realized that in order to explain it well, you have to, like, especially with just spoken word and without graphics, it has to be done very precisely with the language, right? And I feel like there were certain areas where we were talking about it that we just left out, like, simple things that could have really helped in the description to complete, the description. And one of the ideas that I thought of that we didn't actually talk about was this, that I would like to explain now, is that the idea of this wobble of the axis. When I first was trying to learn about precession, I was trying to figure out, how does this wobble of the axis actually result in the whole sky rolling over backwards compared to what it would normally roll over in the period of a day. And what I wanted to describe here is that if you were to, say, stop all of the other motions of the Earth around the sun, the day cycle, whatever, and you were just to wobble that axle 360 degrees in this supposed wobble that it has, and you were looking at the sky, say, at the sun or at the night sky when it happened, what you would actually see is all the stars sort of trailing in a small circle in front of you. Like if you just held your hand out and just rotated in a circle like around a clock.
Yeah, the North Pole would basically point at that would kind of rotate.
It would just roll all the way around back to the North Star and into a circle that you could see the full circle that the North Star made in the sky. Right, exactly. It would not roll all the way over the other side of the planet and then come back up to where it was. No, yeah. The reason it does that is because of its combination with all of the other cycles, and mainly the cycle of the revolution around the sun. Yeah. So that if you shifted that axis a quarter turn, the Earth would have to move a quarter turn around the sun in the opposite direction
to be in the same season.
So if you look at the sun, to be in the same season, exactly. So if you're in the spring, and it's the first day of spring, and then you stopped all of the motions, and then you rotated that axis a quarter turn, you would be in the solstice. Right. So you would have to move the Earth the opposite direction that it normally goes around the sun, a quarter turn, to get it back to the spring season. Right. That is why when you then look at the night sky, when the Earth is when your position on the Earth is facing away from the sun, you see a different set of stars. Yeah. So that I thought was very important to understanding why this rollover happens.
Yeah, that's a really good way to illustrate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes it a lot more clear. The mechanism is what you're talking about.
That's what I mean. Yeah, because that's what took me so long. I'm like, why? How does this almost? It's not really a turning of the Earth.
The whole thing doesn't turn. Yeah, but what makes the background stars move around is because the period where the spring happens, due to that turn, moves around the orbit of the sun.
Around the orbit of the sun in the reverse direction of our normal orbit.
Which means when you're looking at dawn, so just before the sun rises, you're basically looking just past the sun at the background stars. As the precessional wobble moves a quarter turn, you have to move the entire Earth around a quarter turn in its orbit backwards. And so you're looking at a totally different set of stars behind the sun.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
So anyway, any feedback on precession from any of you listeners would be great. Let us know.
Yeah.
Brothers of the Serpent.
And we also
gmail.com or Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter. Snake Bros with no vowels.
Right. He took the vowels out so that we had 3 extra characters in our tweets, because that's extremely important when you're trying to describe precession with 144 characters.
That's right. Or 160, or however many Twitter he uses. Yeah, something like that.
I mean, that'll just give you a little bit of punctuation that can totally make it understand.
3 exclamation points on there to make sure.
Yeah, 1 exclamation point, 1 number 1, and then 1 exclamation.
That's right. Exclamation point, 1 exclamation point. Another, not a correction, not another, because you weren't making a correction, but a correction I need to make from the last show is I said it was Boyle's law that was the mathematical progression of the planets away from the sun. It's Bode's law. So that was, I got 1 letter wrong. Sorry about that. Or no, wait, 2. There was an extra letter. And yeah. Anyway, it's Bode's law.
Stop while you're.
So yeah, I shouldn't have called it out without. I knew I wasn't sure what it was, and I shouldn't have said it, but I did. And so it was both.
Basically,
both
it's the Watcher's fault.
That's right. The Watcher's supposed to correct us on that shit, and he didn't.
He apologized already, so we let him keep his job.
Way to not watch, Watcher. Good looking out, Watcher. I think. All right. So, speaking of the Watcher, I just want to say that the Watcher's dad is like, he sends us an email for every show, and like, I think that's fantastic. It's like great feedback. Every show we get an email from him, episode 71, and then everything that he thinks we got wrong, and it's awesome. So
now we know where the Watcher gets.
That's right. So this is from 71. From Sydney, England. He says, 1, at about the 20-minute mark, you started a discussion about what I've been trying to explain to you several times about the fact that we are in a world of nothing but data. I'm not talking about ones and zeros, but that it's all written in a quantum program in a quantum computer, just like you were contemplating. You are confused about data and action and perception of data and action. Our soul observing is what creates time, just as observing the simultaneous 0 and 1 turns it into either the 1 or the 0. Which is why entanglement can be. There is no time anywhere. Simultaneous action despite distance is because distance is an aspect of time. Ergo, there is no real distance either. The Big Bang was probably just the initial instruction of the early computer program. 2. Much, if not all, of British spelling from Old English.
I have some things to say about that.
Okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's go ahead and talk about that. This is itemized.
I have a problem with your idea of contemplating collapses the quantum state.
Yeah.
That's not what the tests and the experiments have shown. In other words, I'm not saying that it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that what the experiments have shown is that any interaction collapses the quantum state.
Right.
So that doesn't mean that it's necessarily evidence that consciousness collapses it.
Right.
I'm not saying it doesn't. But you can't just, if you're going to blaze us for whatever, you can't just like outright claim that that's what that means. So right now they're working on quantum computing. And the problem is that sending the qubit over a, whatever.
A network,
that it's like how far away it gets increases the probability that it's going to interact.
Yeah.
And the moment it interacts, it collapses, and it can interact with anything.
Yeah.
So as long as, like we've talked about, most of the universe is actually empty space. When you look at the size of these atoms and the distances between the quote-unquote particles and everything is just vast areas of empty space.
Right.
So these quantum particles can most of the time
Not interact.
not interact. Right. Well, most of the time. That's a really bad way to say it, but.
They can go
distances,
without
pretty
interacting,
decent
yeah.
amount of distances, especially when you consider that distance as a ratio to their size. They can go extreme distances without interacting, but eventually, the farther they go, the higher the probability is that they will interact.
Right.
So that's my only. But I'm not convinced that you cannot cause an interaction with a quantum particle just by thinking about it. I'm not convinced that it doesn't happen either.
Right.
We just don't know. And it's very difficult to create an experiment that proves that can suggest that maybe it does happen. Like
Right.
putting your mind in the path of a laser.
I'll just say that the main thing that I totally agree with him on is this one part. It's just 3 words. You are confused. I
No,
completely-
absolutely.
Yeah, totally agree
You're
with
right
that
about
part.
that. But I also love the idea of time being space and space. It's like what did he say about that? There is no time. It's just this.
Yeah,
it's all space.
Our soul observing is what creates time, just as observing the simultaneous 1 0 turns it into either the 0 or the 1, which is why entanglement can be there is no time anywhere, simultaneous action despite distances, because distance is an aspect of time.
I like that.
Yeah.
Because I've always thought of time as, just like you would take the dimensions 1, 2, 3, 4. Like if time was the 4th dimension, it's just another place for space to be.
Right.
And like that's kind of the way I look at it.
We've had these like late night discussions about the possibility of like if you could actually stop moving in the other 3 dimensions, would you also stop moving in time?
Yeah,
We've had
and
these discussions.
yes,
Yeah.
so
like motion actually implies, because space and time are together in the standard model, that motion in space implies motion in time. So that ergo implies maybe that if you could stop moving in space, you would also stop moving
Yeah,
in
or
time.
if you could actually move backward in space, you would move backward in time.
Yeah.
Like we can't do that because we don't know what our actual trajectory or our motion is
In time. Yeah.
in space.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't know which direction we're actually going relative to a stationary point in the universe. If we did, then it's possible to say that we could create a machine that's just moved a particle or moved anything right back to a space that it actually occupied previous in time,
Yeah.
right?
And it would actually go back.
And would actually go back in time.
Yeah.
Like that's just an idea. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
that's cool. It's a cool thing to just blow your mind thinking about. Oh yeah, that's just my mind exploding. Don't mind me.
Okay, so at number 2, he says much, if not all, of British spelling from Old English uses AE for the long A sound and EA for the long E sound. I'm not sure what he's responding to here, but thanks for that information.
Hair digger. I think you might have been talking about the pay.
Oh, yeah, the pay. This is the pay. This is episode 50 of 71, yeah. Nowadays, every generation seems to wail about the losses in the world since their childhood. Old culture is not as old as it was. That's interesting. That's right. Yeah, I think, again, you're responding to, like, people wailing about the losses of the Fae mythology.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not supernatural, just not understood. I agree with that 100%.
Yep.
Okay, so the next response he had was for 72. First he says, what a world. I had computer stops for 3 weeks. I get my computer cleaned up and sped up, and then yours starts to break down. See, it's a zero-sum game. One computer gets fixed, another one goes haywire. Thanks, bro, for fixing your computer and making ours go bad. 2. That's a typical Scarp Derp idea about the booms. I've been following those and animal mutilations through Linda Moulton Howe for years. She has hundreds of detailed reports in her website's archives. So yeah, I'm not sure which Scarp Derp idea you're talking about with the booms, unless you're talking about the Cosmic Funk, which I don't think is a real Scarp Derp. But
It's cosmic funk.
I totally agree that like all this atmospheric refraction is a pretty classic Scarp Derp of something they're trying to.
Yeah, that must be what he's talking about.
Yeah.
The guy's talking about that
Yeah.
sound can travel through these little sound holes, sound worms.
I think if they're talking about atmospheric refraction,
Yeah.
right? About how like you can be right in front of a battlefield and there's all these light flashes from explosions, but you don't hear it. But somebody over there, hundreds of miles away, does hear all the booms, and they're like, oh, that's because it's bouncing off of refraction in the atmosphere and Manser, and it's just but you don't actually know that. So I think he's totally right. I think that and it isn't just booms. Again, you have the trumpets, the horn sounds, the crazy screeching noises, the other very odd vibrations that come out of the sky, and it's not just booming sounds. And then, of course, the Seneca guns, which are on the East Coast, have been heard for hundreds of years, long before we had anything like, large. I mean, they had cannon, but that's why they called them the Seneca guns, because they sounded like multiple cannons going off in the bay when there were no cannons in the bay, and there's no other explanation for it because we don't have artillery and we didn't have flyovers that could break into sound barrier, which is what they usually blame it on today. So I agree with you, Script Derps, on that. 3, your sensation of the cat is probably early neuropathy related to your old accident as residual injury. I've had it slowly developing due to diabetes and spinal injury for years. It's really freaky when it's under the covers in the bed. I bet. Who's touching me? What the actual is going on? I don't know if that's what it is, because there's multiple reasons for it. Brett and I talked about this, and maybe you can just come on and say what he said. What did you, Brett, when you pop on and talk about neuropathy? You there, buddy? Is he there? Maybe he's not there. I'm not going to get back up for the wonder.
No, I was outside.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Wow, you came in through the airlock pretty quick.
Yeah, you were on an EVA and just came right in.
Yeah. That's it. It's a portal. Yeah, the only issue that I really have with the potential neuropathy explanation is that, so typical neuropathy from a disease process starts distally, as far away as you can get. So like fingertips, toes, and works its way back. It wouldn't really start in the shins. And if it was neuropathy from your spinal
injury
trauma, it would start at the spine and work its way out towards the toes. Again, like you'd have shooting pain starting from your back out down your legs, and then tingle, and then it would go numb. But that still wouldn't start in your shins.
Right.
Like,
or on the sides of my calves.
It doesn't start in the middle.
Right. On the sides of my calves where the cat rubs. Yeah.
Right. So that would be my only issue with that.
And also, like, the thing is like, I only experience it when I'm sitting there in the computer chair where the cat rubs on me just like that. I don't experience it when I'm doing anything else or laying in bed or anything like that. So, and it's a very specific sensation,
I'm just going to go with Brenner as, like, Electric Universe.
It's Electric Universe, man! It explains everything!
The cat creates a lot of sadness.
All right, and here he's defending you. 5. Water has 3 states, so it doesn't qualify as an example of repetitive phrase to say liquid water.
Thank you. I do that a lot. You really have to, when you're talking physics, you gotta let people know.
We're talking about liquid water here, right?
Yeah, it's liquid water, not solid water.
6. By the way, thanks for introducing me to Manly P. Hall. He is incredible. Yeah.
Agreed.
Dude, totally agree. Manly P. Hall is awesome. 7. There have been 72 presidents, but only 45 of them have existed yet. Whoa. Whoa. Let's see. Okay, and this is the last one I'm going to read here is the one for another one for Kyle. Listening as closely as I can, it seems to me that you have inadvertently written a jazz symphony. I hear essentially the same melody and many variations running through most of the music you play on the show. If you were to line them up properly, you would probably have a symphony.
Oh, that's cool.
So was that a compliment, or was he basically saying that all your music is repetitive and sounds the same?
Yeah, so I went through this phase of techno making where all of my main melody lines were single key piano hits. Like,
yeah. That's right.
It's like, I don't know. Yeah, they're pretty much all the same song. Because I was actually learning, I used that process to learn the program Logic.
Yeah.
When I got it, originally it was Logic 7. And whenever I would travel, when me and Russ would go on road trips, I would bring my laptop and just start making techno. And so, slowly as I make the techno, I learn how to run this program and how to do all these things, which I use in my live music recordings. So the more live music I do, it's a lot more different than my very limited techno abilities.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Chad Symphony sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the last one I'm going to read from him. This is from this is his response to.
You should check out $50 Dynasty, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that's his.
That's my live band.
Yep.
Just go on whatever. You can get it anywhere.
Just look it up.
I think you can stream it.
Yeah, it's out there, man.
It's
Just
out
look
there,
it up.
man. Just check it out.
Okay, so he says a virus enters a cell based on the protein code. Think about pollen blowing randomly in the wind and landing on a plant. Certain chemicals automatically attract one another. There's no consciousness involved. So I think on that one he's given me crap specifically for saying that I think that some of the stuff that viruses do imply that consciousness is fundamental because it's, and once again, I bring the Watcher on to help me out on this because I talked to him extensively about this after I got this email.
So yeah,
Uh-oh.
All right, I'll take over.
Internet problems here, folks. We just lost the Watcher right when he was about to defend me.
So it is still possible that pollen is conscious.
Yeah.
We don't really understand consciousness. It's possible that viruses have some form of consciousness we don't understand because we don't understand consciousness.
Yeah.
And consciousness may govern the interactions of quantum particles. Consciousness may govern the interactions. They may govern the laws of physics.
Yes.
We don't really know because we don't really understand consciousness. So to outright say they're not conscious, I disagree with. I'm not saying they are.
We don't know. I was saying that I thought that it might be evidence for consciousness being fundamental, but I'm not making a declaration that they are conscious. It just seems like, and like the fact that viruses are in that sort of, as a medical professional, you'll understand this, like that viruses are in that gray area of are they alive or not. And like I think that they're there because there's problems with one of the sort of arbitrary requirements for something being alive or being a life form is that it can replicate itself. Now a virus can't without help. It has to use something else to replicate it. It has to use the cell to replicate itself. But it's still the question is up in the air of whether or not it's alive or not because it acts like a life form. It has goals. And it interacts in certain ways with certain things, and it can't all be chalked up to chemical attractions because, there are plenty of other things that have the same sort of chemical attractions that it doesn't bond onto and start injecting RNA into. So I think that, I don't know if we're going to get the Watcher back for this, but basically we had a long conversation about it, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, and I'm not saying that I'm right. Right, I'm just telling you that I don't know, and this show is about questioning things, and we like to. I kind of like to be familiar with the standard model before I start looking for other answers, and I'm roughly familiar with the standard model on the idea of viruses, and it doesn't seem to hold up for me on how they're able to just I don't see a random ability to just connect to cells when they're so minuscule compared to the cells, and there's so much other stuff in the area where they are that have the same chemical signatures as the cells themselves. So I think that the consciousness consciousness is a possible explanation, but it isn't necessarily the answer. All
right, I think we might have got the Watcher back.
Did we get the Watcher back?
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think that I often lean towards the idea that there is, actually, it doesn't even matter. If consciousness is part of it, there is a physical explanation for what's going on. Like, I think that somewhere we can discover what is happening with the physics. Now, I don't know if obviously consciousness has a physical effect because we are living proof of that. Like, we are conscious and we have physical bodies, and our consciousness can direct our physical bodies.
Yeah.
So we know that there are physical principles involved in this connection that consciousness has with the physical realm. So I like to pursue like the physical explanations for things, and like molecular adhesion or whatever, all of that stuff is I don't have a problem with that, because the other thing I thought of was that idea, or that story that I read where it was like however many billions of freaking viruses are landing on every square meter of the earth like every single day.
Yeah.
So there's so many of them that
the chance
that
can
probability
explain.
would say that yes, they're gonna find the right spot to land on, and they're gonna do their deal.
Yeah.
And I also think that resonance may have a lot to do with it. Like their virus and it's this DNA chain that we think of as these little, the double helix. It's all about geometry, and geometry is all about resonance, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Every DNA is going to have resonant qualities. So every virus that has whatever it's made of has certain resonant qualities.
Right.
So it may not stick to things that it doesn't work with, because that is the way it's designed somehow.
Yeah.
Or maybe I shouldn't use the designed word. That's the way it is. It is.
Yeah.
Right. And then if it has a specific type of DNA or whatever that it's using to change or alternate, like this is a lot of those mechanisms can be explained through resonance.
Yeah. All right, we got the Watcher back, so let's let him come back on and give it another shot. You there, buddy? You still there? Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I think I got 2 phone calls. That's probably what.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. So we lost you right at the beginning. So go ahead and start over.
It's Ty. Yeah, I knew it. I blame Ty, dude. It's always Ty. And the funny thing is that it's like he knows that we're recording. What the hell?
Yeah.
Anyway. So yeah, there's 2 possible ways of looking at the mechanism of a virus. One being that you get bombarded with a ton of them, so eventually one of them, like my dad was saying in that email, pollen in the wind, something's gonna hit what it's supposed to. I mean, that's possible.
But isn't there the question of why they don't bond to stuff that they're not supposed to bond to, even though they have the same chemical signatures? Weren't you talking about that?
Yeah, that's my issue with that type of model, is that the cell has a lipid bilayer, and that's what it attaches to. So it's a fat. And you've got high density lipids, low density lipids. That's what cholesterol is, and it's all free floating in your blood. So you would essentially have viruses attaching to that, and injecting them with the DNA or RNA, and that's, as far as I know, something that's never been recorded, observed, or reported.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like if this thing that you're saying that's attached to the cell, that's the thing that the virus attaches to. But there's also free floating ones. Like maybe when it's attached to the cell, it's resonant frequency, or its resonance is now combined with the cell, which is what gives it the properties that the virus is able to
that could
combine
be.
with.
I mean, that definitely could be.
That's your resonance explanation. His dad is talking about chemical attraction, which is totally different.
Right. Well, I think chemical attraction is resonance.
Like, explanation is that in and of itself implies some type of decision.
Yeah, that was my other thing, is that I don't think chemistry really goes far enough. Right. Like, chemistry was developed first, and then physicists came along and started figuring shit out,
answering everything.
Yeah, and so they started looking at what chemists were saying, and they're like, well, how do these guys know? Like, they're not really studying the same exact thing. So the physicists go along and try to check all of the chemists' work, and they find out, well, the chemists do know what they're talking about, but they don't actually know what was causing it, but they had correctly identified all of these relationships.
Yeah.
Right? But chemistry doesn't really go far enough to actually explain the mechanism. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and there's actually
What are you
a
laughing at?
field of chemistry which is called physical chemistry, which goes into that specifically. To me, when I look at it, what I see is a nanomachine is a really good analog to think of a virus.
Yeah.
And when I look at it that way, whatever intelligence or consciousness may appear to be in the virus itself would be something that it's imbued with from a design standpoint, like a programmer or a creator.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can say, in general, I'm 34 now, and for the first 20 years of my life, my dad was always wrong. As I've gotten older, he's gotten some things right.
Yeah.
So take that for what what you will.
Basically, Mr. England, what we want to say is thank you for all the emails, and you're totally wrong. We love your emails and how amazingly wrong you are, because this show is about getting almost everything wrong all the time, and you fit right in, buddy. So keep on sending
us those
emails about being wrong and telling us that we're wrong, and even being wrong in your explanations about how we're wrong. It's awesome because we are wrong, and so are you. So thank you very much. And okay, before we take a break, you were asking what I was laughing at. And I thought of that meme, where like everything is just this applied whatever, right? And there's the part where it's like, well, the chemists are just like, well, biology is just applied chemistry, and the physicists are like, well, chemistry is just applied physics, And the mathematician's like way over here on the far side. And he's like, what are you guys doing way over there? Like the whole, what's true science? And it's like a graph. It starts out with philosophy and gets all the way to physics. And it's like physics, chemistry is just applied physics.
I was getting worried. I thought I was.
No, that's why I started cracking up, because you were basically saying that. Well, chemistry is just applied physics, and the physicists saw that the chemists didn't go far enough, and the mathematicians way over there going, "What are you guys doing over there?"
I don't mean to slam chemistry. I think it's great. That was not what I was intending to do. So
yeah, and physical, like Brett said, physical chemistry is like where they try to merge the two, and it's very, very awesome.
It's basically all waves.
Yeah,
that's basically what I think.
And does anyone? A break. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, at the Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Corporate Studies. There are no degrees here because the learning never stops. And, the being wrong never stops.
Yeah.
Can't give out degrees on how wrong you are. So it's, it's getting into winter, and I've been getting back into the missing 411 mystery. But winter isn't special. Like, this happens to me. Like, it's getting into summer, back into 411. It's spring, 411. Fall, 411. I'm just saying. But it's getting into winter, and I'm getting into the 411 stuff. So I kind of want to, I've been trying to, arrange this in my mind to explain it, because you guys know that I go through all these discussions online, and I'm a part of, all these subreddits about stuff, and I see these questions a lot, and I'm sure that some of you know, some of you have listened to my previous 411 explanations, and you guys have heard this stuff. So bear with us, if we have new listeners or whatever, the people I'm explaining for them. And also for myself, because I like to go through this stuff with you guys, because it sort of helps me get all these things in line in my head. So first of all, I want to talk about the methodology. I'm listening to Politis on one of the interviews that he's done, and it was one of the early ones, and he's talking about the methodology. And I hadn't heard this one before, so I wanted to kind of recount it here. The way that he set about finding these cases, okay, aside from the story that he tells where the two park rangers come to him outside of the national park and tell him that he should look into it, the way they actually set about, going about finding these cases was, first they looked for cases where people were not found. Okay, so where, before they had a profile, right? They have all these missing persons cases, and they start looking. Let's separate. First, what they did was they separated out all the ones that had explanations like they drowned, they were suicidal, they got attacked by an animal, they broke their leg, and they were stuck. They called all those out of the samples, okay? And then he basically took he separated into like people that were found or bodies that were found or people that were discovered, whether alive or dead, and then people that were never found. Then they started going through all the cases where the person was never found, where they were never located, okay? And that's where they started to see pieces of the pattern, the profile appear, okay? Not all the ones where people were never found were very mysterious. Like some of them are just like you can kind of tell that the person, there was like evidence that they didn't know what they were doing, or maybe that they shouldn't have been there or whatever. But like, and those still may be mysterious cases, but there's not enough evidence in the files to really call them out. But he found enough in the cases where people were never found. And this is the thing. He explained this really well in his show. I wish I knew which one it was specifically. I think it was when he was talking to Whitley Strieber on Dreamland. But he was like, look, in the SAR world, the search and rescue world, it's weird not to find the person. Those are the rare cases. Like most of the time when somebody goes missing, they are found eventually, whether alive or dead. Yeah. Okay. Most of the time they're discovered because these people have gotten incredibly good at this. They have all these statistics, they have all this data, they have conferences every year where they come together. They have like people who are, like people who look at things scientifically or who are statistical analysis, people that are medical professionals. They come together and they put together all they put together like a series of guidelines for searching for people that have to do with all of these various fields of expertise. And then all of these other various things of basically collected data about what people do when they go missing.
I cannot
right?
do that.
So they have these ways. They sit out and they make grids based on how long they've been missing, and they make these circles on a map that get bigger and bigger and bigger. And they have this very like specific, and they bring the dogs out, and the dogs are incredibly talented. And like they do flyovers in grids, and like at the beginning, people walk literally shoulder to shoulder through wilderness, like not missing a single area, right?
Yeah.
So to have people not be found is number one is a very small percentage of the total cases where people go missing. Most of the time they're discovered, whether alive or dead. So you have this small percentage of cases where people are just never found and the mystery is never solved. And it was in that group where he started to see the pattern of the profile that he eventually developed.
And that's when he began to pull in other cases where people were found. But he saw similarities.
Right.
To the ones
So
that
he
were not.
sees all these.
Ah.
That's right. Okay. So you see how this begins to build. Like first, he's look at the ones that never were solved and sees all these similarities across many of those cases, and then he's able to spread out and look at the ones where the bodies were discovered and say, wait. In this case, a lot of those same points happened to this person, and then you look closer, like, well, where were they found and what was the condition? And then you start to see other weird things, and so that builds more of the profile.
Okay. And then you can actually, like, take that, the situation where the people were found, and apply those to the ones
back to the ones where they weren't found and find more. Exactly. Yeah. So this is how he's built the profile. This is why he was able eventually to progress into less like deeply wilderness areas into like rural areas, right? So then you go into rural areas where it's like farmland and, like not cities or whatever, not even suburbs, but just like rural areas where there's houses and shit. It's not a state park or a natural area. There's roads but there could be many square miles of wilderness, but it's owned by somebody or whatever. And then he was able to expand from there into almost suburban areas. And then from there, he went into like very specific cases of like the hunters. And then like he, of course, people were sending him the smiley face murders. Okay, the smiley face murders are like a very specific set of cases where young college age men, it's mostly males, were found like in bodies of water, usually canals or rivers going through major cities. Okay, and it was always the same story. Like they went out drinking with their friends, somehow they got kicked out of the bar, or they got left outside, or they decided to go home early or whatever, and they end up not ever coming home. No one knows what happens to them. They're not on any CCTV, and their body is found weeks, months later, floating in this body of water, and then everybody assumes that they were drunk and fell into the canal that night. But then it turns out that they only died 2 weeks ago and they were missing for a month, right?
Yeah.
So, and then he said, okay, I gotta take a breath. He said these medical examiners. He said the only reason I started looking at those cases specifically, the quote unquote smiley face murders, and the reason they're called that is because it's a long stretch, but people have like said, well, everywhere this was found, there was a sort of a smiley face graffiti nearby where the person supposedly went into the river. Okay, I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. Neither does anybody else, but they're called smiley face murders because of that. So basically, what that means is like the smiley face murders is like. People imply that it's a serial killer.
Yeah.
And their MO is to do this exact thing because it lets them get away with it because everybody assumes the drunk kid fell in the water. Right? So he said the only reason he started looking at them is because some very smart medical examiners began to question the state of the bodies. Number one, a lot of the times it would turn out that they didn't drown.
Yeah.
Okay. Or it would turn out that they did drown, and yet they would find... So this is going to be gross, okay? Just warning you, if you have any kids listening to this, hopefully you don't. This is gross, so, like, get the kids away for a second. But if you die on land, one of the first things that happens to you is flies plant larvae, eggs, in your groin area, okay? It's disgusting. But this is one of the ways that medical examiners can tell the condition of the body, whether you die... Like, if you died in water, that doesn't happen. Flies don't lay eggs...
Yeah.
Right, in your pubes if you're underwater. It just doesn't happen. But if you die on land, that does happen. So they find these bodies in the water, and yet they have the larvae
do that.
there, implying that they died on land, not in water, and yet their lungs are full of water. Right? So there's all these strange things. Like, it's almost like what the idea that you get eventually is that somebody wants it to look like they drowned, but they didn't really.
Yeah.
So these medical examiners are looking at that stuff and they're starting to question this. Like, this is weird. How can his lungs be full of water, but he has these signs that he died on land? Right? So they started to do more tox tests. Now, they started to find GHB in the body. Now, GHB is endogenously produced in the human body, but in large amounts or in certain dosages, it's considered a date rape drug. Basically, what it does is it paralyzes you, but you're awake. You're awake and aware of what's happening, but you can't move anything. Okay. So the other thing that happens is GHB disappears very quickly from your tissue and your bloodstream. Like, even if you're dead, it sort of breaks down. I'm not sure exactly the chemistry. You know, maybe the watcher knows more. The
physics.
The physics, the mathematics of this. But basically, like, if you don't find it, if you don't test for it very quickly after the person is dead, you're probably not going to find any signs of it. But they had these ways of testing, and they found out that these people had elevated levels of GHB in their blood. Okay, so that's why he started to include those cases specifically, is because
I'm just kidding.
The GHB was just in the water. They fell in the water and they couldn't move. Yeah, so anyway, going back to the profile, like his entire like the way the profile unfolded is fascinating to me. Starting with the most mysterious cases where people were never found, and discovering all these connection points between not all, but many of those cases, like boulder fields, berry picking, inclement weather, dogs can't track scent, or dogs seem confused, or dogs seem afraid, or dogs seem to refuse to track, or they track for a while and they quit, right? Or the person goes missing with the dog, and the dog returns. Very small children. Like, this is another thing with search and rescue. Like, and this actually, most police, I can't say most because I don't know this, but a lot of police precincts or jurisdictions or sheriff's offices or whatever have stopped having the requirement of 24 hours if a child goes missing below a certain age. I think it's like 10, because kids under 10 don't run away most of the time. The vast majority of them they just won't run, and like, especially if they're 6 and under, they don't run away.
Yeah.
Right. They might run off into the woods to play, but they're not trying to
they might get lost. They're not trying to escape.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of the older cases you see, the kid goes missing, and then like sometimes it takes a while for the parents to be able to get people out there to really look, because there's this whole 24-hour thing. But in other cases that doesn't happen, and like massive search efforts show up almost instantly, and they find nothing.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a couple of cases that I'm going to try to tell these off the top of my head because I don't have the books that they're in yet. I'm in the process of acquiring every single book. Right now I only own 2 of the books that he's written. But so these cases that I'm going to tell are ones that I was hearing him talking about. One of them really was interesting to me. It happened in like the 1950s, so it isn't recent, okay? But this is the point. The guy, it was a hunting trip, and the guy he went off for he was supposed to be gone for a couple of hours, right, from his camp, and where it was camped with a bunch of people, and he just didn't come back. And he had been hunting there his entire life. He was like 68 or something like that. So he had been hunting there his entire life, and everyone was like, he knows this land like the back of his hand. Or maybe, I'm sorry, he went to get water. He wasn't even hunting. They were out there to hunt, but he just went to a nearby stream to get water and come back. It was like at most a 20-minute walk if you're going slow, okay? And he just didn't return. So they set up this massive search, and they don't find anything, okay? And I mean, it was an enormous search. Like, they had all these people out there, even for the 50s. It was a big search. They had hundreds of people out there combing the woods or whatever, and they had the problem with the inclement weather, okay? So, like, snow and sleet and everything comes in. They don't find him. So, I think it was 2 weeks later, a group of hikers in another area were just kind of hiking around, and they see a body out in this river that was it was the river that he went to get water from. Okay. The river, though, is like 18 inches deep. You can't drown in it. It's just not possible, right? But they reported the body. They didn't go touch it or anything, but they reported the body that was in the water to the authorities, and they came out and got it. And Paulides said the reports were very strange. He was like, so a lot of my readers ask me about the state of the feet, because his shoes are missing so often. So anyway, this guy, I can't remember his name, but he was found wearing only a shirt and his underwear. His pants were gone, boots were gone, coat was gone, gloves were gone, hat was gone, everything was gone. So he was in his shirt and his underwear. They said that his feet were worn to the bone. The bottoms of his feet were worn all the way to the bone. And that he didn't drown, but he died from exhaustion. And his body was found, the place where his body was found in the water was 15 miles from his camp. So, again, it's rare that he is able to, like he says this on the show, he's like, it's rare that you're able to find the condition of the feet in the report. When they say they found the person and their shoes were off, and you're like, well, what was the condition of their feet? Well, this is one where they did tell the condition of the feet, and they said it was worn to the bone. And it's like, so then the question he immediately asks is, could you walk on your feet if they were that badly damaged? How is that even possible?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, like pure terror?
Yeah, people can do crazy shit, I guess.
And like they definitely, it wasn't, another thing that it's, is a big.
But it's like if your feet were worn down to the bone, would the rest of your body
stop allowing you to?
Well, like would there be signs on the rest of your body that you were falling and stumbling? I mean, you should have like lacerations all over you from.
Yeah.
If you have an injured foot and you're trying to walk, like a lot of times you hit something that really hurts bad and you fall.
Yeah. And and when they said
you
that
get more injuries.
And they said that he died from exhaustion, which implies running and like fleeing or that he 15 miles isn't far enough away to like completely kill yourself if you were just walking. But if you were like tearing through the mountains, running through the forest, up and down boulders and everything, and just scrambling. And maybe he didn't go in a straight line, just trying to run away from something.
Yeah, unless it
I assume
it's really cold. Frostbite on his feet and just wear him down because he can't feel them.
maybe that's fair. I can't remember what time of year it was, but the water wasn't frozen, so it wasn't that cold. But it was hunting season, so I would assume that it was in the winter or winter-ish, right?
Yeah.
Still, yeah. Worn to the bone. It's very strange. And this is another thing. Like, another part of this mystery that's very strange is the whole feet and shoes deal with British Columbia, right? Have we talked about this before?
Yeah.
Or the feet, and it's predominantly left feet. You know,
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's predominantly left feet, which is like, okay, so the first thing that like you'll see if you go look this up online is you'll see people saying, oh, well, they were suicides, and the reason, and these are mostly mostly feet that are in running shoes, and running shoes are sort of buoyant. So you would imagine these people are suicidal and they fling themselves off of a bridge into the water, and their body starts to decay in the water, but the shoes are wanting to float, so eventually they come loose at the ankles and just float to the surface, and they end up on a shoreline somewhere, and somebody finds, well, then why are they all left feet? Right?
I cannot
And there's
do
no
that.
evidence that anybody was suicidal. They were able to identify the remains in one of the shoes as belonging to this one particular, and there have been like many dozens and dozens of them found. They were able to identify one foot as belonging to this person, and it was said that he was kind of despondent. But there was no suicidal, but they like have extrapolated from that one guy and saying, well, these are probably suicide. And, you know,
Yeah.
left feet float more than right feet, and I don't know.
So, like, how often do they do this forensic entomology on these cases?
Well, on things like just a foot, they do a lot, as far as I know.
'Cause I mean, like that.
But again, this is
I remember reading about that like years ago. I was like, what is this? I don't remember where. It was in some magazine. There was an article about it.
about the feet.
About forensic entomology,
Oh, okay.
where they study they can pinpoint literally the minute of death.
Yeah,
By
Because
the-
first
by the
fly
state
comes
of the
and lands-
bugs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
and
first
it
fly
was like-
lands on you in 6 minutes.
Yeah, well, within like 80 seconds or
But
something.
if you die in water, it's totally different.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But there should be the same set of circumstances in
Yeah.
the water, right?
Yes.
Depending on the ecological system or whatever it is in the water.
Right. So if you're saltwater or freshwater or river
Yeah,
or lake.
there's going to be different animals that are going to do certain things. and,
Yeah.
like bacteria.
The problem with it is that in a marine environment, that's probably true. But almost like every lake has a very specialized environment, and like, you know, like they all have things that are sort of similar, but most lakes have some stuff that's
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to know the environment that they're in.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
if they're in the
okay,
specific
gotcha.
body of water, like, what are the circumstances in that water?
right.
And then you could,
So you have to have a medical specialist who specializes in that lake.
Yeah.
To know, like that's why
biologists or
Yeah.
whatever, that, and then they have to work together with a
Right.
forensic specialist.
And so yes, and so some of these forensic guys are doing this. They have discovered these strangenesses about these particular cases, and they start digging through the backlog of files, and they start calling other medical professionals and like, didn't you deal with the body that was underneath this certain circumstance? And the guy's like, yeah, and like, that's the files on that, and they send it to him. And they start talking to each other, and this is what Politis was talking about. That a small group of very, you know, like these guys are dedicated to their jobs, and they have discovered these problems, and they're like, well, what's going on? What's really happening here? And it looks like we're being tricked, right? Like in a lot of these cases, like not the feet, but I'm talking about the smiley face murders in specifics. Like it looks like like somebody is purposefully making it look like something happened that didn't, you know. And the other thing about those particular cases is, like, and I've seen these comments online a lot. People are like, well, you know, people get drunk and they fall in the water. I'm like, no, you can only say that if you
People
don't
get drunk and they fall in the fire. They don't fall in the water.
Speaking from almost personal experience here, like personal experience not being the one falling in the fire, but witnessing this thing happening. Yeah, people get drunk and in Texas, people get drunk and fall in the fire.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's a desert out here.
Right, that's right. We don't have any water. So there's fire. That's what we fall in here. Large limestone rocks break and we fall into fires.
I'm sorry.
No, that's
I mean,
all right.
Derail you
No,
there.
that was
Go
fantastic.
ahead.
That was fantastic derail. It was, anyway, so where was I going with all this? I can't remember where I was
You
going.
were saying people, like, on the smiley face murders, like, there's
Oh, yeah.
people online that say
You're right.
people get drunk and they fall in the water.
Right. The problem is that there are lots of college towns that have bodies of water in them or near them in the area where the bars are, and people don't fall into water there. It's just these specific cities where this happens. So other people have tried to say, well, it must be the condition of the canal or the way that everything is set up, and it makes it easy for people to fall in the canal in this place or not. But I've gone and looked at pictures of it, and it's not. Like, you can't even freaking get to the water in some of these places. You know, for this drunk kid to have fallen in the water, he had to have climbed over a whole bunch of crap like Spider-Man, even though he's hammered, and not died doing that stuff, and then got into the water, right?
Yeah.
He had to be very determined to get into the water, and that's...
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna go swimming, man.
Yeah, in Minneapolis, right in the winter.
Polar dip.
They kicked me out of the bar, man. I'm gonna take a dip. So, I have a special story that I want to tell, and it's about one of those cases. And
What, the smiley face murders?
yeah, one of the smiley face murders. So, like the interesting thing about the profile of these particular deaths are these are all young men. Okay, so they're college kids, so of course they're all going to be young, but they're all males, and all of them are sort of top of the line, or top of their game, or they're all like athletes and graduating with all these honors, and like, you know, in physics or medical, they're very smart, and they have everything to live for, and they have like a beautiful fiance. Or we've told some of these stories. So there's this one guy, and his friends called him Mr. Reliable. So that's why I'm telling this story. Oh, Reliable. They were at an event. I can't remember if it was a baseball game or some sort of sporting event, or maybe it was a bar. It doesn't matter. The point is that he told his friend that he was there, but he was like, look, man, I've been awake a long time. I've got tests to take, or whatever. I kind of just want to go. And his friend's like, oh, okay. So, and he was like, don't worry. I'll call my girlfriend. She'll come pick me up. So he goes out into the street, and he makes a phone call to his girlfriend. She answers the phone, and she's like coming to get him, and like she hears him say like, wait, I'm not sure where I am. And then she, like, somebody in the background, she hears somebody say, oh, you're at 99 something street. So that's where she goes, and she's actually right around the corner. Like, she's just like, you know, less than a mile away at that point. She's like, okay, I'm almost there. And he's like,
Yes.
okay, good, because my phone's about to die. And then it dies. She comes around the corner, and he's nowhere to be seen.
Okay.
Right, like she pulled, basically right after the phone dies, she pulls up to the area where she comes around the corner and pulls up to where he was. He's not there. And she gets out, she parks her car, she walks around for an hour, can't find any sign of him. Eventually she gets back in her car, she goes home, she calls his parents, and then she calls the cops, and they say you have to wait 24 hours to report somebody missing. By now, all of his friends, including the guy that was in the bar, her and his parents are all flipping out because he's like Mr. Reliable. He doesn't ever do anything like this. He's very punctual. He's very, right. And he wasn't hammered. He went in with his friend for just a small period of time, maybe an hour. He had one beer and then he went out. Okay. So he wasn't drunk. So by the time the next day comes around, they start up this massive search. And they don't find anything. And the dogs can't find anything. And they can't find anything on CCTV cameras, which were everywhere all over the place. Okay. Same deal. Eventually, they find him weeks. Somebody else finds his body weeks later in the water.
I cannot do that.
But in this case, his clothes are all gone. Right. Oh, I'm sorry. The one thing they did found was his cell phone smashed into like hundreds of pieces near the body of water, which is why they started to assume that he went into the water. Okay. But it was like crushed.
Yeah.
And they were only able to identify it by, like, they gathered up all the pieces and they had some poor nerd in some warehouse, like, fragment them back together and be able to get the serial number off of it, and then they were able to identify it as being his. Because it was completely decimated, right? Just shards of glass and plastic and silica. So eventually they find him in the water, and they said that they ruled it as an accident, but he had blunt force trauma to the head and shoulder area, and they claimed it was propellers. That a boat, that he had somehow gotten, his body after death had gotten mixed up with a boat and it beat him about the head with the propeller. Okay. So that's a really strange story, and like it's kind of the way these smiley face murder things go. Like the person has no reason to disappear, and they vanish sometimes very quickly. Right? There was the one I told before about the guy who went into the bar and never came out.
Yeah.
Right? That story is still strange, and he's never been found, still, to this day. No evidence has ever been found. Then there's the other strange one, and it's in this area. It's in these same areas where this is happening, and you guys can go look this up, but he actually made a phone call to his wife. She was asleep. He made a phone call to her in the middle of the night, and her voicemail picked up, and the voicemail message is horrific. There's like all this crazy yowling, and it sounds like insane animal noises, and you can hear him begging something in the background. He's like, please don't, something like that, and there's all this roaring, and it's crazy sounding. Wow. They actually played part of it on the news, which is how I was able to find it, because the actual message has never been released to the public, but this news station got a piece of it, and so like you have to listen to it with this announcer woman talking over the top of it. She's like, "This is the message," you can hear in the background, like all this crazy, just what the heck, what is going on? And that was the message. He's never been found. He's never been located. You know, and he was like a doctor or professor or something like that, an older man. So he was not a smiley face murderer in the sense that he fell underwater, but this is one of the northern cities where this stuff happens. Right. So, but the most disturbing thing in the 411 stuff is the small kids. So I'm getting back to that. I jump all over the place when I'm talking about these stories, so I have to apologize for that.
Yeah, it's all good.
The most disturbing thing are the small so if any of you have ever been interested in missing persons cases, you might be familiar with what's called the Charlie Project. That is a website online where this girl has dedicated her entire life to building an enormous website database of every missing persons case in the United States that she can find. Okay, and listing them on and finding all she digs out every bit of information she can find about the case, all the articles, pictures, anything she can find, and she puts them all together in a file on the website, and you can go through. It's called the Charlie Project, named after a kid who went missing. Okay, Charlie Project.
All of them are ones that were unsolved, like nobody was found, no body was found.
Yeah, they're all ones that are still. There's people that are still
active,
missing.
Right? Okay, yeah. All right.
So it's called charlieproject.org. So I frequented this website for a while when I started to get interested in the missing persons issue. But and the most interesting thing was she, who I consider to be, no matter what anybody else says, I consider her to be an expert in missing persons cases. She has, by herself, built this enormous reference database. Okay, she read the first Missing 411 book and wrote a big basic commentary on it on the charlieproject.org. You can still go find it. And like, I consider her to be an expert in missing persons cases. And she read this and she was like, I was going through my database and like a lot of these aren't in my database, right? Politis has pulled out, because she doesn't travel. So like he had people going to all these small towns outside of the parks and digging through newspaper archives, right? She doesn't have that. And they're digging through newspaper archives that aren't digitalized yet.
Yeah.
So she starts adding these cases to her database, and she said the most disturbing thing in the books was small children who disappear without an explanation in incredibly rural places where it cannot be, you can't say that they were kidnapped because there's no one there to kidnap them, right? A lot of times these people disappear, there's no roads to get there. You know, they're way out on these trails and like there's no one else there. And if there was somebody else there, the likelihood that this kidnapper would be able to come in and snatch the kid with no noise and nobody else that's around, it's just, you know, she's like, this is incredibly unlikely that it's a kidnapping. So this child, or at least a kidnapping by anything we understand, right? Yeah. So she's like, so first of all, that's the most disturbing thing. And then the second part of that disturbing thing is that when they're found, if they are found, they're found in places they could not possibly have gotten to as a child.
Yeah.
So in those, you know, in that sense, children have been found miles and miles into bogs, right? Basically like half frozen, watery marshes that are in like uplands, right? So it's an upland area, it's like high elevation. There's a marshy area in this valley, and the water is the water plus mud is between 4 and 6 feet deep, and like the searchers are having to go through, and it's up to their chests, and they're freezing their asses off, and there's no way that this little 6-year-old went through all that shit and ended up on a rock in the middle of that stuff, dead. Just not possible.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You know? And of course, they're always found with no clothing or very little clothing. The kids are found almost naked, right? Sometimes with abrasions all up and down their body, but they haven't been molested. You know, no sign of sexual predation, and yet that's the first thing you think. You look at this and you're like, okay, this little 8-year-old girl gets snatched from her parents' campsite. They find her miles and miles away, way up on this mountain ledge, where they have to rappel down to get to her because you can't even climb up to it. They have to land on top of the ridge or climb up to the ridge some other way and then rappel down to her using pitons and ropes and all these people. So she couldn't possibly have gotten there. They find her, she's only wearing her panties. She's dead, but she hasn't been sexually assaulted. So what is doing that, you know? Like what is the like the first thing you think of is some crazy like deranged, like forest-dwelling human has taken the person, but to do what? To drag the child all the way up the mountain and just drop them on this ledge? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And then, of course, one of the other big profile points that he talks about a lot is where bodies are found where they've been searching multiple times. So the searchers all go out there and they're searching everywhere, and and he's like, look, I don't think that SAR people are incompetent. They're very good at what they do. They find the vast majority of missing people. So when they're all out there searching, and suddenly on day 10 of the search, the body is found on the trail that they all used to get to the search area, that's not... Something weird is happening there.
Yeah.
Like the body is placed there. It wasn't there. He's like, I don't think that they were hopping over the body every day to go out there to search for that guy. They didn't miss that, Or when this spread out campsite, so they're searching for this dude up and down the Appalachian Trail and they can't find him anywhere, and then months and months go by. And then somebody who's hiking the trail says they next time they get to a station or whatever, they report like a sort of a disturbing looking campsite that they saw just maybe 50 feet off the trail. So the searchers go back up there and they find this dude that they've been looking for that they looked for like over a year ago. All of this shit spread out all over the place right off the trail. And then like they find fragments of his body kind of off in the woods near that. But what it looks like is somebody took all of his gear and sort of spread it all out looking for something and then just kind of left.
I cannot
So,
do that.
We need to take a break. But, and we'll come back into this, and I've actually got one of the books here. I want to read a couple of the cases directly out of the book. So,
Doesn't make any sense. Must be. It's not snakes.
no, it's not
We know
snakes.
that, for
No,
sure.
it's not snakes. Too cold.
Yeah, it's too cold for snakes. And we're back. Brothers of the Serpent podcast, hailing from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of disappearances, where all of the right answers magically disappear without a trace.
All right, so I have the Missing 411 Western United States and Canada book here. And I just want to read. I've got these two cases here, and there's probably some other ones in the beginning that I want to tell you guys. So first one is Christopher Andrews. Yeah, I think I need to move this mic because I'm going to be looking down. Christopher Andrews, missing, went missing on 10/03/08, so this is 2008. Iceland Lake, Tuolumne County, Immigrant Wilderness, California. Age disappearance 42. So, Amy and Christopher Andrews were married and lived in the wealthy community of Hillsborough, California. Christopher was employed by the Oracle
I
Corporation,
cannot do that.
and he had actually left school one semester early to take the job. In October of 2008, Christopher took a 5-day break from work and headed to the Immigrant Wilderness area, a region on the northern perimeter of Yosemite National Park. So this is these two cases. I'm going to read this one and the next one are in Yosemite. He was an experienced and avid hiker. He was safety conscious to the point of carrying a personal safety transponder. So this is the reason I want to read this story. Whenever you listen to David Paulides on the air, he talks about, because people inevitably ask him like, well, how do we not go missing when we go hiking? And like, I love camping. How do I not do this? And he says that the two things like that he rarely ever sees is somebody that went missing who was armed and was carrying a personal safety transponder. Okay, and you can get those things now for like $150. Like if you break
That and a life straw.
yeah.
Gotta have a life straw.
Gotta have a life straw. So a safety transponder just talks to satellites and basically sends an emergency. You just click it, it sends an emergency signal to a satellite, and it informs authorities that you've gone missing, and then they're able to zero in on the signal. Okay. So he was safety conscious to the point of carrying a personal safety transponder. Christopher was in the wilderness when the transponder was activated on Friday, October 3rd. The transponder sent the signal to emergency services via satellite. Emergency services contacted the Tuolumne County Sheriff's Office and notified them of the location of the signal, Iceland Lake. The signal was received late Friday, and rescuers were not able to get started until Saturday morning because of high winds and a storm that hit the area. So again, you have the inclement weather. And it's like, the interesting thing about inclement weather, because a lot of the arguments I see are people like, well, you know, weather happens. You're going to have some cases where people disappear because of inclement weather, or weather happens right after they go missing. But what's interesting about these cases, when you read through the books, is you find out that it isn't that weather happens
Stand down or die.
when they go missing. It happens when people start looking for them. That's what's weird about it, right? It's almost like, you know, they go missing and there's no reason to go missing. There's no inclement weather. There's no bad snowstorm or no ice, you know, ice rain or anything like that. But as soon as somebody says, you know, this guy hasn't been back in a while, and the searchers get out there, then the storm hits. Now, you could also say that's happenstance, but it's still weird when it also matches up with all these other profile points.
Yeah, my thing about the inclement weather was always like, well, that's a good reason why they didn't find it. Because of the weather.
Yeah.
Die.
Weather created conditions which was impossible to find.
Right. Yeah. But you also expect people to find tracks and stuff when there's snow, and a lot of times, you know, it's like, that's weird too.
Yeah. If it's snowing, you won't find tracks.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Okay. The location where Christopher activated his distress signal has large areas of exposed granite, which is another profile point, like the boulder fields, but also like massive amounts of granite for some reason. It's a big Radon. The transponder signal was coming from an area between Relief Lake, which is at 7,200 feet elevation, and Iceland Lake, which is at 9,200 feet elevation. There is a very open and easy height between these two locations, and there would be no need to climb to the top of large granite spires, which are all throughout the area, these huge spires of granite that just stick out of the ground. Christopher would have known bad weather was moving into the area, and it would have been obvious. The last place you want to be in bad weather is on a peak, as this exposes you to the elements of weather, lightning, wind, rain, etc. There are very good areas near Relief Lake to protect himself from the elements, and there was no need to take to a peak. There are 3 separate and obvious valleys that lead to Relief Lake from Iceland Lake. A few are very protected in our areas where you could sit out the whole storm, right?
Yeah.
On October 5th, a helicopter went into the area. At the same time, the personal beacon shut down. They were unable to locate Christopher at that time. Rescuers initially had difficulty locating Christopher. It wasn't until the weather cleared and a helicopter flew into the area that they were able to find him wedged into the bottom of a crevasse near the bottom of a granite spire. He was dead. Officials believe that he had climbed to the top of the spire, slipped on a wet surface, and had fallen to his death in this crack. So, like, they had found like this massive, long, thin crack, and he had fallen way down and gotten wedged into it. And like, they would never have found him without the personal locator, even though it turned off eventually. But it's like it came on after he fell, because that's where he was. You know, it's very strange. So Politis says, I have personally read hundreds of SAR reports outlining almost identical circumstances. The hiker is always alone, falls to his death in an area where he should not have been. Christopher was a very smart hiker. What could cause him to climb to the top of the granite spire in bad weather? So the question becomes, why did he go up there? Because obviously he was up there at some point. He'll fall down into this crevasse. He got up there somehow.
So the crack was like,
Don't do that.
basically he wasn't at the base of this thing.
No, he was jammed in a crack in it.
Way up in there. Way up on top. Okay.
So the only way to see him is to fly over the top of the spire and look down into the crack in this thing, and they saw him way down in this crack. You could not see him from outside the spire.
Yeah, so he couldn't have gotten into the crack from outside.
No.
He had to go to the top to get fall down.
Yeah. And so the question is like, why would you climb? You know, like, if inclement weather is coming in, you don't climb to the very top of the mountain, because that's where the weather's going to be the worst, right? Especially when you're talking about cold. Like, and the wind is going to be insane, and then you try to blow you off the cliff. So why did he go
his
there?
transponder wouldn't?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like maybe he was already in trouble. Thought his transponder wouldn't
Work better up there?
Yeah, but that seems ridiculous.
Yeah. That is a good point, though. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, you can do stupid things when you're, you know, you can do stupid stuff when you're lost.
Yeah, or
and
he was
afraid.
climbing to get away from something.
Right. I think that's the implication, is what drove the guy to the top of this thing in this horrible weather, and then he falls into the cliff. Like, it's not necessarily saying that something pushed him in there.
And you make it all the way to the top, and then you fall in a crack that's
Right.
at the top.
That's right. That's weird. Okay. This next case is Stacy Ann Ross. Now, if you go to most of the stuff where he talks about this case a lot, but I prefer his written version of it because when he tells the story, he skips some of his own details, and I just want so this case is very. This is also the one that has the conspiracy stuff in it because of the way the parks treated this case. Okay, Stacy Ann Arras went missing 07/17/81, 3 miles southeast of Tenaya Lake, Yosemite National Park, California. Age of disappearance 14. So he says, if there's one story in this section that has caused me to stop and take notice of the dangers in Yosemite, it is the disappearance of Stacy. She was 14 years old when she and her dad joined a group of 10 people and their guide for a trip through High Sierra camps on horseback. The group had stayed together, stopped for lunch at Upper Cathedral Lake, and then headed for their first night stop at Sunrise High Sierra Camp, approximately 3 miles southeast of Tenaya Lake and a mile and a half from Sunrise Lake. The trip parallels Highway 120, approximately 1 mile southeast of it. Stacy had some aches and pains from riding all day and quickly went to the old cabin she shared with her dad. She took a shower and then she wanted to take a short hike to stretch her legs. She started to leave the cabin in sandals when her dad stated that she had better put on hiking boots if she was going to walk on a trail, so she did. At an elevation of 9,200 feet, it would be a slow hike with a vast amount of exposed granite. The lack of trees makes this a spectacular area for sightseeing. Gerald Stewart, who is 70 years old, was also on the ride, and he volunteered to join Stacy on her hike. So Stacy and Gerald started the short 1.5-mile hike to Sunrise Lakes. The hike is across giant slabs of granite with small clusters of large trees that surround many of the hundreds of small lakes in the area. After only a few minutes, Gerald got tired and explained to Stacy that he was going to sit and rest. It was at this time that the trail guide for Gerald and Stacy's trip, Chris Grimes, happened to look 50 yards up the hill from his position in the corral and caught the last glimpse anyone on Earth would see of Stacy. So he basically was able to look from their camp up where they were and was able to see the old man sitting down and her standing there next to him. Stacy stood on a large boulder and looked into the distance and walked into the sunset. Okay, so now he says, on page 467 of Butch Farabee's book Off the Wall, he states that the 9-day search for Stacy included 8,004 man-hours, 57 hours of helicopter time, 4 separate agencies, and not one clue about what happened to her. The search cost the National Park Service $99,845 in 1981. Dang. The potential value of NPS tracking missing persons cases may become evident with this disappearance of Stacy. Maybe the NPS does not want this publicized, or maybe they don't realize the following relationships exist between Stacy's disappearance and the disappearance of others in this same area. I requested the NPS case file on the Stacy Arras disappearance. The request was identical to many others I have made to the NPS system for people who have disappeared and were never found. One of the many cases I requested and received was the disappearance and subsequent investigation of a missing employee and ranger. Up until the point I requested Stacy's case file, I had never been denied my request on any missing persons case. Prior to the formal denial by NPS in supplying me with the Arras case file, Special Agent U, spelled Y-U, for the Park Service from Yosemite called and asked me a series of questions. He wanted to know why I was requesting the case. This is a violation of the Freedom of Information Act. Any citizen can ask for any federal file, and the government cannot ask you why you're seeking it. This cannot be grounds for refusing to comply. The agent stated that I was not going to get the case file ever. I advised him that I had several case files on missing people in the NPS, and they were all still active and open. He stated that he didn't believe me. A rather rude comment. I advised him to call the local FOIA administrator in Denver, Karis Wilson, and confirm what I was stating. The agent did clearly state that there were no suspects in the Arras disappearance. The case is still classified as a missing person. There are no leads, and there is no apparent sign that the classification will change in the near future. So, I confirmed that this is just a missing persons case. When I told him she wasn't listed in the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, he stated, again, that he didn't believe me. I have never had such a negative conversation with anyone in the NPS. He denied access to the case file. His arguments why I could not have the file included that there was a possibility that the case may develop a criminal lead. Excuse me, the case was 30 years old. By his own admission, they had no leads. The closest person to Stacy, Gerald Stewart, at the time she disappeared, closest physically, basically, would be over 100 years old today. Why would he make such a statement when I had already received many cases from the NPS that were open and active? Fact. Stacy Arras was not listed in any database as a missing person. Fact. the MPS has denied me all access to the case file. I'm not a great believer in conspiracy theories, but why has this case been withheld from the public? What is in Stacy's case file that the MPS does not want released to the public? It would appear that the MPS has kept Stacy's case out of public view for 30 years, including not putting her on any of the national databases for missing children. Why? In the fall of 2001, I appealed the Stacey Arras decision by Special Agent U to another branch of the MPS, and I was again denied access.
That is weird right there.
So the other thing that he points out is the FBI's involvement in some of these cases. Now, if you go to the FBI's website, they'll explain to you what they investigate, right? And in most cases, the FBI does not, like sort of bump the state's jurisdiction out of the way unless it's interstate, right? So if like somebody kidnaps someone and they stay within the state lines, the state may request FBI assistance in the case, but the FBI does not have jurisdiction. But if the person kidnaps somebody and then crosses state lines, the FBI takes precedence. Okay? That's how that works. But they explain on the FBI's website all the stuff that they investigate. Like, here are the cases that we do specifically. And in that list is strange disappearances of children. Okay? And I think it's a good thing for the FBI to be involved in because, like, you want, you know, as a nation, we want to protect our kids. Right? And so we have the most powerful, I mean powerful in the sense of manpower, not government power, but manpower and like brain power. The FBI,
resources.
And resources. And they have the best Politis makes a point of this, the FBI has the best profilers on the planet. And they have the best profiling systems on the planet. So he's like, we have a profile for these cases, but the FBI, they really know what they do. They have guys that this is what they dedicate their lives to, is building profiles. They're, because they catch serial killers. Yeah. Like the FBI is, in some ways, it's designed to catch like non-standard criminals, like serial killers, right? Serial killers is like not a new phenomenon in terms of the human race, but it is a new phenomenon in terms of criminal investigation, because they're so good at what they do that it has only been very recently when we have all this communication where we've been able to figure out that this stuff is happening, and then they're able to start catching these guys, right?
Yeah.
So the FBI is designed to catch non-standard, or I should say, they're designed to investigate non-standard criminal activity. And to like take all these disparate things and put them together in these profiles, and they have these crazy nerds down in these basements putting all these facts together and like drawing, singing strings across maps and shit, right? Okay, that's what they're good at. Okay. And what he's pointed out, and this is fascinating. When I was listening to this, I was listening to a more recent interview with him, Politis, and he was saying that what they've noticed over the course of the years where they've been doing this 411 stuff, is the FBI has been showing up earlier and earlier to the weird cases. Okay, like they are still, and they always say we're not taking the case, we're just monitoring. And he says what they mean by monitoring is they're sending their guys there, they're catching all this data, and they're sending it back to the profilers at headquarters, and those guys are putting it together. So what he's saying is they're showing up earlier and earlier. They know something's happening, and they're. It's like they're
paying attention.
They're paying attention, and they know something's happening, but they haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you think this is connected to why the Park Service wouldn't give them the information on this case?
I don't know.
Because like that, we were talking about this weird shutdown of the observatory, and the reason why they wouldn't tell anybody was because there was a possible connection to criminal activity.
Yeah.
Right.
That could be it. There may be something in the States.
But it's weird that it's 30 years old.
Yeah.
And there's still, like, what criminal activity, I guess if it's a ring or something, right, of multiple people that are doing this criminal activity, then,
that's the other thing,
it would
like,
make sense, but it's like...
Yeah, so what does the FBI think it is? That's what I want to know. Like, they have to have, they haven't figured it out yet, but they must have ideas. Okay, here's the other thing. Like, the last bit of information on the Stacey Arras case, the only thing that they, like... Again, 8,000 man-hours, 9-day search, cost them almost $100,000 in 1980. That would be $1 million now, whatever, right? The only thing they found was her lens cap to her camera, and it was just inside the little copse of trees that she walked into the last time anybody saw her. The little lens cap laying on the ground. That was all they found. Yeah.
Snatched right there.
Right.
Yeah. It's freaky.
So, 2 things he lists here. Let's see if I can. Yeah.
So wait, this
What?
guy that
Yeah, Special Agent U.
that was so nasty
So
to
this-
him on the phone. It's like,
You make a good point. I just want to say this about the FBI. You know, maybe this is why they wouldn't give him the case. The special agents for the National Park Service are trained by the FBI. So maybe you're right. Maybe there's some kind of connection there. Like they go to the same investigative training courses that they send their FBI agents to. In other words, is what I'm saying. Like, so maybe
why would they do that with these people? Like this person, you or special.
because
What
there
is that person's job?
The special agents are the interior, the NPS interior cops. Like there are crimes and criminal activities in the parks, and they have these
So
guys.
they have these special agents that are
who's-
trained by the FBI to
to like catch
because they've known about these crazy like things for a long time. So they have to get the best freaking guys in there. I mean, it just seems odd.
Down or
That in a
die.
park. I mean, I guess like I don't know. The criminal activity I think of inside of a park is stealing artifacts and getting drunk, right? Like doing drugs and partying.
right. So there are like one of the criminal activities at
Stand down
poaching.
or
Okay.
die.
Now you don't need a freaking special agent trained by the FBI to catch poaching, but they have found enormous like drug crops in national parks. People.
Yeah.
Not tons of them, but they have found people who are trying to do drug manufacturing or crop growing way out in park wildernesses where it's almost and that I would say that's less now than it was back, you know, before we had all this satellite imagery, because now you
I guess if
see
you
a
were-
freaking marijuana field.
I guess it kind of makes sense if you were like this crazy abductor type person, murderer type person from the city.
Yeah.
And you're wanting privacy or a way to get away from.
So you go out into the park and wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The problem
So
is
that what I'm saying is that makes sense in terms of like getting an FBI agent or a special agent
Yes.
in these parks to
and they have
take care of like monitoring that type of
yes, and there have been some serial killers have been identified as working in national parks, and they've been busted. We don't, you know, generally when they identify a serial killer, they get busted. Right. Like as soon as you figure out, once you've figured out that there's a serial killer there, you're most 75% of the way to catching them. You know, not always, but so they have found serial killers that operate inside the parks, but they usually work in the cabin areas. They're not in the incredibly remote, like people riding horses on the middle of nowhere, because you don't know when people are going to go there. People show up to a national park, like the Watcher and I went to Big Bend. We went out into the backcountry. No one, including us, knew where we were going to be, except the vicinity of that canyon. But we didn't tell the parks that before we got there. They don't have to have our plans. We show up. We tried to get the camp spot. And in other words,
right, and it's so
It's
remote
hard
that
to-
like you would notice if you were being followed because
Yes.
it's just like
Right.
There's only one access road. To
right.
it.
Every other car we saw, we were like, look at that guy. Because you don't see a car all day, right? You're
Yeah.
like, what's he doing out there? Yeah. And yes, you would notice you're being followed, and then it's hard to like set yourself up, like, you know, like in a city, you can sort of hide behind like a trash can and like wait, you know, for some little kid to come walking by. Well, you can't do that in the middle of nowhere. Like you can hide there for months and no one ever comes by.
Yeah.
So that the likelihood of somebody being in the right place at the right time to snatch somebody from a little kid from the jaws of their parents, basically, is what happens. You know, like the parents turn away for a couple of minutes, they turn back, the kid's gone, and it's never found.
Right, like if you were following this group of 10 people that were riding horses, and just say you were out in the woods and here come the horses, and you're
Right.
like, oh, okay, so I'm going to sneak around on the side
Yeah.
and just follow them for a while,
Right.
hoping that one of them will wander off by themselves. Well, that one person wanders off by themselves,
And you're in the wrong
and
place.
you're on the other side of the group. You're like,
Right.
dang it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just... So then they just, like, somebody happens to notice you, like, dashing across
Right,
the field.
running across the granite because there's no trees.
Yeah, like, this is... doesn't make sense.
Right. And then there's... I don't have a specific case example here, but there are cases where children, like, so if they're camped in a valley, in a bowl,
Yeah.
right? So they get into the bowl, there's a pass, they come through the mountains, and then they're in a bowl where everywhere from your camp is up. Okay? And the coverage there is like it's rocks and shit, but it's not, you know, there's no trees. anywhere you are away from the camp, you can turn around and see the camp.
Yeah.
Right.
People get lost anyway, or
Yeah.
go missing.
And they find them thousands of feet up, dead. You know, and it's a little kid, and you're like, well, he could see the camp from anywhere he was on this hillside. Now, maybe they couldn't see him because there's boulders and trees or little bushes, but anywhere he was, he could turn and find the camp. So what happened? Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Okay, there's a story at the beginning of this book. Let's see if I can find it. That it starts out with this guy who is a Bart Schleier. So he has also told this story on some of the shows, but again, all the points that he has in the book is just, you know, when you listen to him tell the story on the shows that he goes on, it's interesting and it sort of gets you into it, but the details in the book are what's really tough.
I just want to say about the last story, though.
No.
I think it was you.
In 1981, I was 3.
No, you. Yeah.
Oh, it was you! Special agent. I don't know. I snatched her when I was 3 years old. I was out there next to, what was it called? Iceland Lake.
No, you. I mean, the
Yeah, special agent you.
Like that guy, I think it was you. He was mean on the phone. It was him.
Yeah. You're never going to get this file. Hello, serial killer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what a serial killer would say. Okay. Bart Schleier. Missing 09/14/2004. Reed Lakes, Yukon Territory, Canada. Age of disappearance 49.
Stand down.
If there was ever an outdoorsman who would be considered a man's man, it was Bart Schleier. Bart was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming in 1954. Due to the location of his birth and the fact that his father, a physician named Otis, was an avid hunter, Bart's life was destined to be lived outdoors. His father took him around the world on hunting adventures, and this had the boy hooked on the hunt, but not necessarily the kill. Bart graduated in 1979 from Montana State University with a master's degree in wildlife biology. He wrote his thesis on bear activity in the Yellowstone National Park and attempted to understand how the bear reacted when confronted by humans. Bart later worked for the Interagency Grizzly Bear Study at MSU and learned live bear trapping skills. Later in life, he became the world master of luring bears into traps. Many professionals stated that Bart knew more about bear behavior, tracking, and luring than anyone in the world. Bart worked for a variety of groups after he graduated from college. At one point, he was employed by the Montana Fish and Game Department, where he would set up bear trap lines in some of the toughest terrain in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. Once the bears were trapped, Bart would install collars and follow the bears throughout the summer to study their behavior.
Wow. What brings you here?
One of the many stories about Bart's athletic prowess tells of days he spent hiking the mountains, tracking and walking for 12 hours where there were no trails. So basically, it's bushwhacking is what they call it, right? Bushwhacking for 12 hours that's incredibly tiring.
Yeah.
Then he would head back to his cabin. Once he was home, he would start up an exercise regime of push-ups, squats using logs he had crafted for the task, and a variety of other exercises that would cripple the average person. And he was doing these exercises after a full 12-hour day in the mountains. So this dude is...
He's hardcore.
This guy's hardcore. Yeah. He moved to Alaska for a short period and studied taxidermy while enjoying the Alaskan outdoors. For Bart's next adventure, he was recruited by a friend to travel to Russia, to the Far East, to study and trap Siberian tigers.
Oh, man.
Bart was again the optimum expert for trapping, collaring, and studying the tigers. It was also in Russia that he developed a relationship with a beautiful Russian woman, Titania. That's right, Titania. Bart and Titania had a son, Artyom. This is the first time he had dedicated time to a relationship and family. In 2002, so he goes and traps Siberian tigers in Far East and Russia. And it survives that. It's fine, you know. Well, it's a big deal. Tigers, Russia, not a problem. Meet a hot chick, have a kid. No big deal. No big deal.
2 more push-ups.
Squat with this lot. 2002, Bart moved to the Yukon Territory and called Whitehorse home, so the town of Whitehorse. He developed a keen interest in the Yukon wildlife and was specifically interested in bow hunting sheep and moose. As a hunter, Bart had conquered almost every continent and most big game with his bow. He felt it offered a bigger challenge than hunting with a rifle. It should be clear to all readers that bow hunting is a skill that can take years to perfect. Yes, I'm really good with a rifle. I have not been able to hit anything with a bow yet. Or with a crossbow, which should be even easier. So, you have to be a lot closer. You must be stealthy, patient, and committed to be a successful bow hunter. Bow hunting is much more dangerous than using a firearm because you must get very close to your game. You will read about bow hunters in this book that disappeared and were never found. On September 14th in 2002, Bart arranged for a float plane to fly him to Reed Lakes. The lakes sit approximately 110 miles east of the Alaska border, 5 miles west of the Klondike Highway, and 10 miles south of McQuestion, Yukon. There are 4 major lakes in the Reed Lake chain, with the largest being about a 1.25 mile long and the same distance wide. The lakes are isolated from the highway by a river, and travelers cannot get to the lakes unless they fly in. Bart's plane successfully landed at the largest of the lakes and dropped him and his gear on the street. So he basically flies into this like incredibly remote area. The plane has to land on the water. He jumps out and is like, "I'll see you in a week," right? Like that's hardcore. Yeah. And it's in September in the Yukon.
Man, this guy's nuts.
Okay. Bart not only took a tent and supplies, but also an inflatable raft to be able to meander around the lake. So Paulides says, "I have spent many weeks in the Yukon and developed a few contacts. Warren Lefave is the owner of Inconnu Lodge in the eastern side of the province. When I asked Warren for a provincial wildlife contact to discuss the region around Reed Lakes, he sent me to Rick Fernal. Rick spent 25 years as a wildlife biologist for the Yukon Territory before retiring in 2008. I asked Rick about the Reed Lakes area because I wanted to understand what type of wildlife and habitat it offers. Rick immediately stated that he knew about the Bart Schleyer incident and could never understand why he went to the Reed Lakes. So like, the guy's like, "You're talking about Bart Schleyer, right?"
Yeah.
That guy was crazy to go there. And I asked him, like, "Well, what was he doing there?" And the guy was like, "Dave?" Right?
Yeah.
There's no reason for him to be there, Dave. So Rick said the fishing wasn't good at the lakes and there wasn't much wildlife in the area. Rick made it clear that there were many other locations with better fishing and outstanding wildlife opportunities that put the Reed Lakes to shame. So it's like really, like when I've read this story many times, and I started to think that section has started to make me wonder, what was Bart really looking for? Maybe he again was on the trail of something strange. He had conquered almost every animal.
He was looking for pyramids.
You heard it here first, folks. Bart had scheduled his float plane to pick him up at Reed Lakes on September 28th, so he got there the 14th. He scheduled it to pick him up, what was that, 14 days later?
14 days later,
Yeah.
2 weeks.
The pilot arrived at the lake, pulled up to Bart's camp, and was confused by what he found. Bart's tent was found knocked down, but the pilot was not sure by what. Near the tent, he found Bart's backpack with bear spray, along with his VHF radio and a knife. The pilot yelled for Bart, but did not get a response. He imagined that if Bart had left, he would have taken his backpack and his supplies, which were still in the area. The pilot left the area and contacted RCMP, who later contacted friends of Bart. The RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, right?
Good.
RCMP, it's kind of like our state troopers, but on horses.
Okay.
Like old school.
Yeah.
Royal Canadian
gotta
Mounted
be.
Police, yeah. Mounties. Initially, he had a very limited role in the search for Bart. After he was reported missing, the RCMP did a flyby over Reed Lakes, and that was it. But Bart's friends arrived at the area and immediately went across the lake from his tent. Here they found his inflatable boat. So the pilot landed and the boat wasn't there, but all of his gear was there, and his tent. And he was like, "Why did the boat's gone?
Yeah.
The stuff's here." So they found the boat 60 feet inland from the boat, so on the other side of the lake, and then 60 feet away from the shore where the boat was found, they found a bag full of gear. Leaning next to the bag on an adjacent tree was Bart's bow and arrows. The bag of supplies had not been touched, and it was obvious to his friends that he had been sitting on it. They said it appeared as though Bart had been calling moose from that location. So he gets off the boat, he kind of hikes about 60 meters, sets his bag down, sits on the bag, gets his bow and arrow out, gets his moose collar out. Okay. They said it appeared as though he had been calling moose from the location, so they continued to scour the area. A short distance away, they found a camouflage face mask with a small amount of blood on it. They then decided to call the RCMP back to the scene. On October 3rd, 2004, the Yukon RCMP and the conservation officers went to Reed Lakes en masse and set a grid search pattern in an attempt to find Bart Schleyer. 60 yards from the bow, searchers found a skull and a few teeth. They also found a pair of camouflage pants, a camera, and a few small bones. The teeth were later positively identified as Bart's. Most investigators would stop the investigation at this point and claim that Grizzly killed the wildlife biologist, but there were too many strange circumstances to claim Grizzly had killed the man who lured grizzly bears for a living. For starters, there was significant bear and wolf scat at the scene. Many samples of scat were recovered and sent to a lab for testing. One issue that completely baffled investigators, there was no clothing found underneath the bear's scat. When bears eat people, they eat everything. Clothing, jewelry, and anything you are wearing goes in and eventually comes out. Okay. It was also odd that Bart's pants were lying on the ground near the scene, almost as though he had removed them. Okay, this is another big deal. Like when they find the clothes that have been discarded, the buckle, the belt is undone, and the pants are unzipped and unbuttoned. It isn't like they got ripped off, right? No bear unbuckles and unzips your pants. Like, yeah. And sometimes when they find the kids, the clothes, if the kids are wearing articles of clothes, a lot of times they're inside out. Like they'll find the kid and he's missing his pants and his shoes and stuff, but his shirt's on, but it's inside out. Huh. Like something put it back on before it dropped him, and it just put it on wrong. Okay. Most of the clothing, okay, so it was also odd that Bart's pants were lying on the ground, almost as though he had removed them or they had somehow come off. Most of the clothing that Bart would have been wearing was never found, even after a wide and comprehensive search of the area. Conservation officers at the scene knew that bears usually catch their kills, burying them for later, right? So they'll kill you and then they bury you for later. A thorough search of the Reed Lakes area didn't produce any evidence of a catch or any bloody ground from a body being dragged or wounded. The other troubling issue here is that there was no sign of a struggle anywhere in the Reed Lakes camp where Bart was staying or near his bow. No moss, no tundra, or branches were disturbed. It was a very calm sight. Several investigators made statements. So, like, if he'd have been sitting there and a bear came and grabbed him, there would have been a huge area of devastation because they would have fought. You know, the guy that can, like, bench press logs and shit, like, would have fought the bear. And, like, the bear probably would have killed him fast if he would have gotten a drop on him, but there would have been blood everywhere and signs. He was just gone.
And then his clothes would have been all eaten.
Yeah, exactly. Several investigators made statements that his death is a mystery, and the idea that a bear killed him does not make any sense. People who worked with Bart all claimed that he would have gone down with a struggle. His friend said Bart was in outstanding shape and would have fought for his life.
Do that.
They do not believe a bear could have attacked Bart by surprise. So, one of the last items that investigators found 60 yards from the bow was Bart's cap and a baklava he was wearing. There was no damage to the cap or the baklava, no blood. Nothing to indicate something dreadful had happened. So they find some clothes, blood, and he's, in his skull. This is the fragments. And remember that this is not...
Yeah, like his whole spine, rib cage.
Right, and it's like he's reduced to bones within a month?
Yeah, that's weird. Because he went there in September.
Yeah, like September 14th. Like, yeah, it's in October. And like his skull and some teeth, and that's it.
That's really strange.
So, we went over, folks, but it was worth it. But we need to go ahead and quit. So you guys remember, you can always go to the website and comment there. Don't forget our Twitter feed, which is brand new. We're totally Twitter noobs. But,
SNK, PRS.
Snake Bros, no vowels. Get on the Twitter feed. And don't forget to share the show with everybody. That would help us a lot. And I just want to thank you guys very much. Good night, don't move. Don't disappear.
I cannot do that. cannot do that. I cannot do that.
I cannot be contained! Rah! I did nothing wrong!
Yeah! I cannot do that. I cannot do that. Stand down. I cannot do that.